Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. Time for another show, and the computer's just not up to it, apparently. All right, well, a couple of miscues on getting music started, but increasing difficulties. I thought that we were probably just experiencing some kind of lag issues with the processing the other day. When I began to notice the lack of responsiveness to clicks in Pocket on the laptop. But now it looks like we're running into a known issue with aging MacBooks. The click function of the touchpad is just simply disappearing. It's interesting. It works at the top of the screen, but if you're positioned anywhere other than the top couple of tabs, I can switch between tabs, but I can't get it to register clicks in the main part of the screen, which, okay, well, it's apparently an issue with these things, although usually it's associated with an aging battery, and the battery apparently swells underneath, but I haven't noticed any. That I would have noticed, but I guess it could be swelling slightly enough so that it's not bulging on the outside of the case, but is separating things elsewhere. All right, well, so we got that to work on, so that's a $2,000 problem to fix. Although I guess I can get an external touchpad. The only thing is it won't happen today during the show. So that kind of that gets in the way of things. That's the main methodology by which I access all of the stories I have put away for ourselves to reference in Pocket. Well, I think I can hobble along. I mean, it will create some awkwardness. I can still use the main showrunner computer to do that. Of course, if there's any audio connected with any of these things, well, it'll just start playing right in the middle of the show, and we can deal with that as it happens. And then, of course, the other things like cueing music to get out during the breaks will become awkward too, as that all runs on the desktop. And so if I'm reading and working the show on the desktop all at once, could be a little awkward today. We'll see how it goes. Couldn't be any more awkward than trying to deliver a non-State of the Union address to a joint session of Congress, as Donald Trump had to do yesterday. I'm sure it didn't bother him, though, of course. There's no point, there's no worry about, well, have you fact-checked the speech or anything like that. And I think he wings a lot of that speech, too. He's very comfortable just lying his ass off right in front of everybody. So I guess we should have figured on that going on. And I don't know. So far, most of the discussion that's been taking place in front of me in the last day or so has been, well, how should Democrats appropriately show their disapproval of what's going on? Should they not show up for the speech? Should they walk out of the speech? Should they hold up signs as they did? It was a little weird. They brought little handheld fans or actually bidding paddles at auction is what they looked like, that had various sentiments expressed on them in pre-printed form. False, a lot of people holding up false things, or save Medicaid, or all sorts of things. There was one that said Musk steals, semi-interesting. And one solution also is to raise such a thing that you get thrown out of the House, thrown out of the hall for the duration of the speech, as Al Green did, which I think turned out to be one of the better alternatives for how to spend your evening, and was certainly the most impactful. A couple of other people boycotted the speech entirely. Some held their own town halls. AOC, as is her usual practice, spent the time online streaming, and various alternatives. Anyway, it was an interesting venture. I didn't watch, thankfully, and I haven't seen much in the way of clips. This one is, I think, less valuable than most, just because it won't really matter what he says. Most of anything he claims will likely be a lie. Anything he says he's going to do is highly questionable. in terms of whether or not he'll execute, and even more questionable in terms of whether or not it stands up in the end in court. The big to-do heading into, the big dodgy, anyway, to-do heading into the speech was right in the hours before they released, and I don't remember who it was. It must have been like General Services Administration, probably a dodgy direction, listing hundreds of federal government properties which they claimed they were putting up for sale. It's not entirely clear, economically speaking, bookkeeping wise, what that meant for the balance sheets. Like, what would be the purpose of this? I think for most kitchen table economists, you think selling property, okay, that's raising cash for our cash reserves to pay for things, but it's unclear what you would be paying for or why you would need the cash. And of course, it's macroeconomically unclear whether or not these buildings would ever sell, even if you were offering them for sale. To sell off the entire federal enclave of Washington, D.C., for instance, would be a tall order from the Century 21 perspective. That is there any kind of a market for these buildings? And then, of course, there was the other more practical problem, which was as they were ordering everyone back to the office and back to work, they were selling off the buildings, allegedly, that people were supposed to work in. And in fact, the site listed the main Department of Justice headquarters. All the department headquarters were being sold. In fact, even listed properties such as steam tunnels that were built, way back when in the industrial engineering days of Washington, D.C., steam tunnels that supplied water and heating steam to federal buildings downtown. I mean, tunnels under the street were being sold. Like, who's going to buy that? It was very bizarre. And then within about half an hour of all of that being pointed out, they apparently disappeared from the site. I don't know whether it was them realizing their error or I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether they realize anything over there. But so that was going on in the background of the speech. And, of course, the speech itself, nonsense, start to finish. And also one of, I guess, the longest, maybe, such speech. I know it makes it difficult to refer to what kind of speech it is. If it's not technically a State of the Union, but
joint address to Congress.
Yes, right. It's pretty silly, but it's also, I guess, the longest one. Certainly the one in which the most personal insults were thrown out from the podium. And let's see, he got a Pocahontas in there. I happened to see that one, so that worked out real great. And seems like a mess from start to finish. How much of it did you watch, Greg?
I watched the first until Al Green got thrown out minutes.
Okay.
I thought, okay, that's going to be the highlight. And then the rest I picked up bits and pieces on YouTube this morning. I wasn't going to watch a campaign rally.
Yeah, that's kind of, that was my approach to it. And, I mean, which signals its own
which, by the way,
unseriousness.
State of the Unions and joint addresses to Congress in that first year, never, ever, ever, never, ever move the needle on polling. So, no point.
Yeah, that would
only
not surprise me.
Watch.
And
people who's living it is, and it's not, since it's a hobby, I don't get paid. I don't have to watch.
That's good. I mean, I think it's good for your health. Generally speaking, not to watch. This was just, he's never really given a serious State of the Union anyway, and he's not going to start now.
Yeah. So, interesting thing, though, that did happen, and, taking a big picture approach.
All right. I think we can do that. The screen still works on my computer, so big pictures seem okay.
Okay. Well, as long as the microphone works. And by the way, for those of you who, for some reason, are fans of the little dingy Skype call-in thing, that's going to go away in the next 2 months because Microsoft is getting rid of Skype.
They're selling the building.
Probably have to move to Zoom unless somebody has a better idea. And I've got Zoom set up, so we're going to have to practice on it at some point. Not totally sure how that works. Whether you have to invite me 10 minutes before the show every morning or whatever, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
There may be
That's true. I forgot about that part. Maybe, but I think you can technically schedule things, but yeah, I think you can just hit start call and then go from there.
Who do you call? I mean, on Skype, I know how to find
Ghostbusters.
you. On Zoom, I don't know how to find people, but I'll figure that part out.
Yeah, well, we'll work it out.
In any case,
yes,
the sounds
you
will
just get
change.
Walkie-talkies. Yeah.
Speaking of clicks and unresponsive, touchpads, we have an unresponsive Skype very, very soon. But looking at big picture, Al Green and the Progressive Caucus holding up the auction signs were pretty illustrative of the fact that, there's a lot of divided opinion, which is not bad, among Democrats about how to properly respond. Okay? In other words, you can't just mobilize. That didn't work the last election. You got to persuade. I don't think the auction signs are very persuasive. That's good for mobilizing the base, but not very good for persuasion. Al Smith's, Al Green's,
all theAls.
Giroux, AI Green.
Al Jazeera.
That actually was very effective, but not everybody can do that. One guy has to do that, and he did that. If they all did it, not so much.
Yeah, maybe not.
What it does show
they might have followed him out.
When Marjorie Taylor Greene yells out "liar," or one of the Joes yells out "you lie" to Obama,
right.
They didn't do anything because they're not basically authoritarian pricks.
Yeah, that is interesting. That's a big change, right? In terms of
yes, House rules allow you to do that, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah, last time they just were like, this clown, keep going, no one can hear.
So throwing him out actually made it much more effective. So I'm glad they did that.
Yeah, okay. I'm all right with that. And it was
as a protest, but still,
he had his cane with him to shake at him. That was good.
Cane. What you want to do is persuade people who voted for Trump this time, even if reluctantly, to not vote for him next time and not vote for Republicans in the midterm. And so I'm not sure any of that we saw last night was particularly effective, but, you got to do something. The base gets really upset if you don't do anything. Yeah. But the base is more likely to respond to things that don't really help with persuading people.
Yeah, that's probably
true. So you got to balance that.
You do a little of each, I guess.
So you have to do a little of each. So good for Al, and I'm glad he got thrown out because that made it more effective, and that's all good. But I think the speech was not really a big story. The big story is a Trump slump on the stock market.
Trump slump. Okay, Trump slump. Yeah, that's cool.
Like that's the big words. Now in pre-market trading
big market
today,
dive. Yeah.
The futures, that is, they're pretty neutral, and that's to be expected because when you have a big drop, the bargain hunters swoop in. So I expected that yesterday, but actually it was a 2-day slump.
Yeah. Okay.
And in fact, the market gave away all the returns that it had made, all the money it had made from Trump being elected. Business people like Trump being elected because they like low taxes and less regulation, and they foresaw that that's what was going to happen. And like everybody else in the leopard face eating party said, he's going to do these other things, but he's not going to do anything to me.
Right.
And all that tariff stuff, I don't really believe. I know he's saying it. I know he's telling us he's going to do it. I know he swears he's going to do it, but I don't really believe he's going to. Oh, my God, he's going to do it. And so when they did it, the stock market dropped and gave back all the money it had made.
Oh, wow.
Now they're reconsidering what to do. Their problem is they're so fixated on less regulation and less taxes. They still don't have any idea what Trump's going to do. Uncertainty is not good for business. Some of them are actually having regrets if you're in the farming or food business, definitely, because these tariffs are going to hurt you. Auto industry, absolutely. These things are going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Textiles, clothing industry, yep, you're getting hurt. And so these basically ridiculous tariffs, and they are ridiculous. This isn't just my opinion. I'm going to read you some headlines here.
There's another guy who thinks they're ridiculous.
Yeah, there's at least one other guy, the Wall Street Journal editorial board. So let me give you some headlines here. New York Times, trade war sends a shiver through global markets. Wall Street Journal, How markets are reacting to tariffs news. Dow falls 670 points. Fear gauge extends rally. If there's a fear gauge that basically you can buy in on how bad you think things are going to be, and that's going up. Mm-hmm. But Wall Street Journal opinion is the best, my favorite so far. First one is, this is from the editorial board itself. Trump takes the dumbest tariff plunge. He says that 25% levies on Mexico and Canada will begin Tuesday. Stocks fall, which is basically the story.
Crash.
Right?
All right.
Trump likes to cite the stock market when it's rising, but what happens when it plunges? Mr. Trump said at the White House there was no room left to negotiate with the two American treaty partners. Some of his smarter advisors have been hoping he'd start renegotiating and delay tariffs, but Mr. Trump wants tariffs for their own sake, which he says will usher in a new golden age. This is a problem because tariffs are a bad idea. And the next, also editorial board piece, same day, yesterday, Trump's tariffs whack Trump voters. Whatever happened to GOP concern for the working class? Well, there never was a GOP concern for the working class. We know that. I know that. You know that. But voters didn't know that, and so they voted for him. But, FAFO and all that. So the Wall Street Journal is pretty clear-eyed about what's going on. The thing is that you never know, and Trump will tell you, I meant to do this. You never know when he does anything whether it has the staying power of Scaramucci.
Yeah, right.
His advisors were already saying, well, maybe he'll pull him back today.
Okay.
We just wanted to threaten them so that they would cooperate. That's not what he was doing. What he did is he thought it was a great idea. The markets thought it was a terrible idea. Now he's reconsidering.
Yeah.
And if he does pull back, which he probably will in some form or fashion, he'll find a face-saving way to say, this was my plan all along and I won. And, of course, he didn't. And, of course, it's stupid.
Yes.
But half of the media will go along with that.
Yeah. As a explanation for what he's doing?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, I spoke to the White House, and on record and off record, they said, no, this was the plan all along. And so I'm accurately stenographying what they said because that's what I do as a reporter.
Okay. I could see. Well, it's easy to see how that would happen. A guy in a suit is telling you that this is happening, and as you know, suits are extremely important in the White House.
Yes, even Elon Musk wore a suit last night.
Yeah, because it would be disrespectful otherwise, I guess.
Right.
That's interesting.
He didn't bring all of his legal suits with him, but he brought one of them.
I mean, he's probably got one of those tuxedo T-shirts somewhere. He could have worn that.
Well, he could afford to borrow.
I didn't see the kid. I assume bedtime for the little guy. X8.
He was sitting with Al
812 or maybe you take care of him. You're leaving early, right? Take him back home. That was interesting. Also, I noticed that Trump could not resist declaring, for an applause line, that Elon Musk was the head of Dodgy, and of course they had just spent the whole week.
That's not going to help in court, is it?
No, it's not. And as a matter of fact, within half an hour or so, there were a couple of cases in which people were making motions to submit new evidence of that and just quoting straight from the address and saying, we just spent a week in here litigating this, and the president of the United States got in a suit and everything and told the Congress and the world that wasn't true, and we'd like to do something about that. So we'll see. I don't know whether there's going to be any repercussions or whether judges are going to start saying, the lawyers who spent all week insisting that he wasn't the leader have got some explaining to do to the board or to the bar association or to me. I don't know, but it'll be interesting. There are filings already. People did in fact pick that up and start filing.
So Howard Lutnick, who I think is the Commerce Secretary, hard to tell. Can't tell the players without a scorecard. It's all new.
Gosh.
Said, maybe? I think Trump is going to work something out with Canada and Mexico. You do more, I'll meet you in the middle. We'll probably be announcing that tomorrow. He said. Steve Inskeep over at NPR actually wasn't having any of it. Because after Lutnick said that, Steve Inskeep included it in his tweet and then said, the president launched a trade war, drove the Dow down, baffled companies, enraged allies who said they'd negotiate but can't figure out what he wants, and triggered warnings of a recession, which, by the way, are big time, big deal. A lot of recession warnings. Now his Commerce Secretary tells Fox it may be over in a day.
Okay.
So Inskeep wasn't buying this was the plan garbage.
Yeah, well, I mean, the plan keeps changing, I'm sure, but
he doesn't have a plan. He doesn't know what he's doing.
I guess that's really what's happening.
This is like the second time he's reversed. None of this will make sense unless you remember these people are really stupid.
That does help explain things.
It helps explain a lot.
Yeah.
Right? They don't listen to experts. They don't ask. Yeah. They don't Google. They don't do anything.
True. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that even underlies the buildings for sale debacle yesterday, too. I think they really just, the kids in Dodgy just don't have any basis on which to understand that there's more to this than downloading a data and putting it in a spreadsheet and saying we're selling everything the federal government owns. Really? Where are they going to work? Oh, I don't do that. I programmed the database to grab everything that was labeled federal property and put it in a spreadsheet, and I thought that was it.
Right. Oh, I should throw in, just by the way, for completeness' sake, the New York Times coverage of the speech yesterday.
Why not?
Analysis, basically, he's lying.
Oh.
Trump celebrates his disruption but slides over its cost. President Trump's speech to Congress covered tariffs, Ukraine, and cuts to the federal workforce, but did little to address the perils that come with his abrupt speech. And then they had fact-checking. Joe Biden especially let the price of eggs get out of control, and we're working hard to get it back down. This is misleading at best. We found hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud. No evidence. Countless other nations charge us tremendously higher tariffs, and we charge them. Exaggerated. So in other words, he's lying again. Still.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is just flat not true. I don't know why they don't say so.
It's just flat not true. But the Times has trouble saying he's lying because they're afraid of him.
Yes. Well, even the auction paddles didn't say lie; they said false.
Yeah.
So people have problems with that, telling the president he's a liar. Except the Republicans don't, and they don't get thrown out for it.
Yeah, they didn't. Luckily, because it's too long and they would have needed bigger paddles, but they didn't hold up little paddles. That's misleading.
Yes, logically inconsistent and without foundation. Big giant placards on a stick. Well, they tried, and people are fighting about it, so they're awake. Whether or not it was a good idea. People fighting about whether or not it's a good idea to keep pointing out that egg prices are still out of control. I don't know.
And they're going up, not down.
Yeah.
And the idea that it's Biden's fault is ridiculous. I mean,
please.
You just can't, foist that on the public.
Yeah.
The public is such an interesting thing to study. And it's never what the
public hear
want.
That? Yeah.
And, what the public really cares about is prices and inflation.
It's certainly the most universal.
That's what they care about. They don't care about any of this ideology stuff. And Trump can speak all he wants to his audience at a joint session of Congress or a rally. It doesn't matter. It's the same speech. It doesn't make any difference. The price of eggs is the price of eggs. He can blame Joe Biden. And the only interesting thing about blaming Joe Biden is, of course, we knew he was going to do this. I was ranting, somewhat off color last week about the fact that Biden didn't spend enough time blaming Trump. That's absolute political malpractice. We knew he was going to blame Biden.
Yeah,
but it's not going to work
because
because people care about the price of eggs, not who was responsible 2 years ago.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, as I was saying, there's a big battle going on about whether or not it's strategically not only valuable at all, but whether it helps or hurts to be focusing on this. But I think first of all, it's not the only. It's not the only thing they're doing, focusing on the price of eggs. This is one of a million things.
The price of eggs is enormous. And it's one of the big things that everybody sees every time you go to the store.
If you're not talking about it, then when Trump does something like remind people what the price is and blame it on Biden, it works better unless everybody's been walking around saying, he said he was going to lower the price of eggs right away,
exactly.
And he didn't.
That's one of the reasons
I know it's a
why
dumb thing.
It's absolutely important to focus on that. The other is that even if you're not in the store buying eggs, you'll see the sign saying only 1 egg per customer, only half an egg per customer.
Right. You take the white, you take the yolk. I mean, look, you can't have rationing of foodstuffs in America and not have people think something's wrong with this place.
So you damn well better blame it on Trump.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you should, and of course, this has to do at its heart. Of course, there's a potential pandemic behind it, and we've got a record on this guy in handling pandemics. It's not good.
As the Wall Street Journal says, Mr. Trump is volatile.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who knows how long he'll keep the tariffs in place? Retaliation that hits certain states and businesses may cause him to reconsider sooner than he imagines.
Mm-hmm.
And again,
we knew this would be
reading
the case.
Republican congresspeople who say, yeah, I know it's going to hurt my constituents, but for patriotism, they really don't mind paying higher prices.
That's the
and
new
you
line.
hear stuff like that, and you think to yourself, these guys are idiots.
Yeah, well, that's why. I guess that's the thing you can say when you have gotten the memo. No more town halls. Well,
Yes.
I won't have to hear from anybody. I don't know.
Democrats
all
are
the
actually
telephones,
launching
but
town
okay.
halls. Roughahana said he'll go to any district which doesn't have a town hall, and he'll do his own. There should be other people that do that too. Maybe from the same state, that'd be even better.
Yeah. Now with him,
It's
like,
Army.
okay, I hope they're far away from me. I don't know if I would be happy about his town hall. I'm happy it's happening.
No, but it's the concept. I like
Yes.
I don't
love the concept.
hope he holds one, but I like the idea he said he would.
Sure. Right. Absolutely. Go ahead. Go for it. Why not? Try Guam. Have a good time.
Look, they made the press cover it. I read about it.
Yeah.
Oh, Democrats must be doing something. I guess they're not doing anything.
No,
they're not doing what I want. Well, what do you want?
Well,
I
that's
want
a
to make it
perpetual
so
issue.
that he lost the last election. No, it doesn't work that way.
No, the town hall thing is a great
There's
idea.
things you can do.
And it doesn't much matter who the person is standing in the front of the town hall. The point is that there should be some yelling. And honestly, if you go and you do it in a suit and you're a Democrat, the picture looks the same as when they're yelling at Republicans. So it's okay. It's a good plan.
So after the break, I'm going to start with Puck, who has an article called "The Boys of Bummer," which is all about how he's losing Gen Z men.
Okay, sure, why not? Where's he last put them? That's where you look for them, and you'll find them.
The Dave Portnoys of the world, not the Rogans.
Hi, everybody. This is Scott Anderson, your summary guy. Were you looking forward to an egalitarian democracy free of bigotry, misogyny, racism, and greed, where people of different appearances, belief, and heritage had a right to live without fear, and everyone could expect a basic level of health, stability, and safety throughout their life? Well, too bad. The plain fact is that we're heading in the wrong direction. And where we once had a voice in such things, increasingly we don't. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. However, if you're looking to join people who understand today's issues and can intelligently address the reality of today from your point of view, you can join us at Kagro in the morning. As you know, there aren't many of us out there, at least compared to them. We need to stick together, and by that I mean send us money. That is contributions to patreon.com, secure, reoccurring contributions. Those contributions keep this show on the air and us together. We've been through a lot together. The temporary loss of the presidency, we hope. The temporary loss of the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, we hope. Face it, we are pretty much all that we have left. Remember, we couldn't do it without you, and you shouldn't do it without us. We're in this together, so thanks.
We have to be on.
I don't know.
We have to be on now because now the show is coming back. Welcome back, everybody. We're trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out how I can explain all of the functionality of Zoom in the commercials.
Yeah, in a minute and a half that we have during the break.
Yeah, I mean, Zoom is not that difficult to use. It'll do the same thing and all, but you're familiar with what you're familiar with, and Zoom for you has been accepting. Well, yeah, all you've had to do is people send you an email that says at 5 o'clock, click on this. So you click on it. That's enough. There's easier functions, and I think there is just if you just load it up and I give you the my contact. You can just press a start call button and it'll start ringy-dinging. I don't know what it rings like, though. That's a funny thing on my end. We'll figure it out.
Because if it's not an acceptable sound for the show, we can't use it.
Right.
Unless we connect
what do you think it's
prior
gonna
to the
be?
show, and then I just stay quiet for
an
the first 5
acceptable
minutes,
sound.
which is like
that happens.
unbelievably hard.
Yeah, well, I make you do that regardless. Normally, when you call on Skype, I talk an extra 5 minutes. You're used to it. You're pretty good at it. You sip a little coffee and
exactly,
and hang out. But yeah, I don't know what you think the ring sounds like. That it would be inappropriate for the show. Like,
I don't know.
F you, someone's calling.
Moron.
What? This is a terrible ringtone. I got to get rid of this thing. This is
well,
really
like
unacceptable.
Come on, keep it.
Yeah. Well, okay, that wasn't what we came to say.
No, we came to say,
yet,
I want to tell you about
I don't remember what it was.
Which is in Puck News by Peter
Hamby.
Right. The original title was, Is Trump Already Losing the Trump Bros? But they changed it. I mean, that's what the URL says.
Oh.
But the actual title that they have published now
I'll open it.
Is The Boys of Bummer.
Oh, yeah, right. That's it. Made me think. It sounds like a Mad Magazine parody of some kind.
Right. Exclusive new polling reveals how the Gen Z men who helped put Trump in the White House, Dave Portnoy types, who were into sports, stocks, and crypto, are souring on his presidency as expectations for a shiny new economy collide with our current tariff-laden reality.
Okay.
It's interesting. You know, a half dozen friends sent me a tweet from Dave Portnoy last week. And the tweet said, if I'm going to be fair, these questions need to be asked today. That's what Portnoy said. Why is the release of the Epstein list always a shit show?
Oh.
What's the point of booting out illegals and criminals and somehow becoming a safe haven for the Tate brothers? Why is crypto in the toilet if Trump is cryptic king? How far does Tesla stock have to crash before Elon goes back to work?
That's a good question. He's only working 1 day a week.
How far do you have to go to be away? And what becomes of things when they're lost? I mean, these are questions that the philosophers have been asking for ages. So I have Jack Handy sent Peter Hamby a tweet from David Portnoy last week. Portnoy is the head of Barstool Sports and the whole conglomerate of professional attention magnets, who has long identified as just a regular guy who doesn't care much about politics, has been notionally supportive of Trump's during the 24 campaign, and says Trump offered him a job working in the Commerce Department. But a little more than a month into Trump's second term, Portnoy's posted some gently critical assessments. If I'm going to be fair, these questions need to be asked, he wrote.
Okay.
And I told you about that tweet. The question implied by my friends who knew I spent a lot of time interviewing young men during the 2024 presidential campaign, does this mean the bros are abandoning Trump?
He's 47, so it's kind of not. I think he's sort of past bro age, but he's bro acting. And his money is made in bros. I got it. All right.
Portnoy, of course, is not that. He's at least adjacent to a lot of right-leaning and Trump-curious media figures who are often just asking questions. Joe Rogan, Jake Paul, Lex Fridman, Theo Vaughn, et cetera, et cetera. But he's often been miscast as a Trump disciple by libs who've never bothered to listen, watch, or buy anything Barstool related.
That's me.
And while it's pretty obvious Portnoy was never going to support the blue team, it's a bit of a category error to lump him in with the rest of the Trump Bro podcast crowd. Portnoy, as anybody who listens to him knows, would rather guzzle motor oil than hang out with Clay Travis at a MAGA inaugural ball. He's contemptuous of political correctness and the identity politics of the left, and he's a sports freak, and he's an unapologetic bro, but he represents something a little more specific and relevant to many of the younger men who abandoned the Democratic Party. Portnoy is a business role model, a self-made multimillionaire who took Barstool from a local Boston rag to a massive multimedia empire with a blue-collar grind, an enthusiasm for risk-taking, and an unfathomable lack of shame. And he might be a Don Imus.
All right.
You know, could be liberal on some things, could be reasonable on some things,
egg prices,
could be a complete and utter jerk on some things. Of course, he's dead, so he can't, rehab himself.
Him, right.
Bet big, move fast, never settle. My friend John Della Volpe, the pollster who runs the youth research firm Social Spear and who did the Harvard Youth Poll, would probably place many of Portnoy's admirers into a category he calls high-risk hustlers. Gen Z men who are more likely than their peers to bet on sports, invest in stocks, and dabble in crypto. For this group, the hustle isn't about ambition or just about ambition. It's a survival strategy. Their financial mindset is shaped by the belief that playing it safe leads to economic stagnation. For this segment of younger voters, mostly white men, The idea of sitting still and watching your 401k grow steadily over the decades isn't a consideration. Their preference is for bold, disruptive leaders. It mirrors their financial ethos: big bet, move fast, don't settle. They're generally pro-Trump and more likely than their Gen Z peers to have positive opinions of Elon Musk. Now, I have to remind you, these are people who have never lived through a recession. That's why they feel the way they do. It changes everything
not as
when you
adults.
actually experience one. And say, oh, what? The stock market can go down? I've never seen that. That's
an issue.
So, it does make it a big, they're going to have to FA, and they really have to FO, because otherwise they don't know. Del Volpe's the man I call for insight on whether Trump might be seeing slippage among these young men. With home prices stubbornly out of reach, crypto slumping, the stock market spooked. Since the election, Del Volpe started a monthly poll tracking the attitudes of voters under the age of 30. So it wouldn't include Portnoy, as you pointed out.
Yeah, 17 years.
But it's the people who listen to him. It's a group that Democrats have traditionally depended on, but that Kamala Harris failed to win by a large enough margin. The main reason? Younger men broke decisively to Trump by 14 points after Biden won them by a large margin 4 years earlier. It was a massive swing between two election cycles. The reasons are manifold, but concerns about opportunities for success in the post-COVID economy were chief among them. 6 weeks into the new presidency, Del Volpe said that Trump's support among young voters is already taking a hit as expectations about a shiny new economy collide with our current reality. Trump's overall favorability has dropped 7 points since January, the weekend before the inauguration. Trump came into office with a 50% favorable rating among Gen Z voters. Now it's at 43. Since mid-January, Trump's favorable rating has dropped most significantly among young rural voters, 17 points. This farm tariff stuff isn't going to help. Independents down 13, white women down 10, and women overall down 10. At the same time, Trump's standing among young white men has remained about the same. So it's not significant right now, but when you ask him about handling the economy and inflation, the president is on much shakier ground. Del Volpe gave me an exclusive look at his social sphere polling between mid-January and mid-February. In January, 62% of men under 30 approved of Trump's handling the economy. Now it's 48. On handling inflation, Trump has taken a 15-point hit. It's just under 40 when it was 55. And those downward trends are from Del Volpe's February poll, which was in the field 2 weeks ago before multiple news cycles about nagging inflation, tariffs, egg prices hitting an all-time record, and before Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies took a massive hit. Trump's favorability among young men remains steady, masking their growing skepticism about his economic policies. Women have already broken with him, which, again, is just simply another fancy pollster academic way of saying, women are smarter than men. If life doesn't become more affordable, as Trump promised, and quickly, even his strongest backers may conclude he can't deliver.
He cannot.
That's the background, though. And again, it just emphasizes that even when you start to come to realize that Trump is a liar and he can't deliver, it still takes time to admit to yourself that you made a mistake.
Yeah, if you whether or not you've committed to him, that's true.
Just ask him about directions.
Exactly.
I don't need directions.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, am I lost? Is this not working?
No,
yes,
I know exactly
but I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna let on with that. Also, just like Portnoy's not gonna let on that he's a millennial, not a Gen Z, and that his audience, I would bet that his audience is chiefly millennial, not Gen Z, but love to be confused with Gen Z. Gen Z wanting, I think, little or nothing to do with millennials. They think they're old. They think of millennials as middle-aged people, which they are now. But you and I grew used to thinking of millennials as the kids. And now even Gen Zers, honestly, are like they can't understand the alphas, the kids who are teens and preteen to immediate post-teen, and big balls would be an alpha boy.
Yeah. So
I don't think they're listening to Portnoy.
Del Volpe does these focus groups, and again, I think she's finding the same thing Sarah Longwell finds.
Okay.
One participant, a white man, was asked why he's optimistic about Trump. And the guy answered, I said optimistic because I'm going to be moving up with my job. I'm hoping Trump can fix the economy. Another, a young Hispanic male, said he's going to give Trump more time. With the previous president, I was generally scared. I'm a Democrat, but I think Trump's policies and goals are what America needs in order to be successful. So, he's bought into the idea that we have to do these things. And so Trump has to be proven to not deliver to get these guys to swing.
Yeah, and so, if they'll do that, right. It's always a good question.
These perspectives on Trump, a little financial anxiety leavened with wait and see, sounded a bit like Portnoy during an appearance on Fox Business Channel last week. Stuart Varney asked Portnoy to score Trump's presidency so far. His response, conveyed what a lot of young men who voted for Trump have been thinking: chill with the culture war stuff. Thank you very much. Stay focused on the bottom line. Epstein list is a circus. That was stupid. Pam Bondi's an idiot. But overall, Trump's doing what he said he was going to do. I'm a very simple man. I like it when my stocks are going up and my wallet is getting fatter. Right now, it's going the reverse way, so you start to raise your eyebrows. Overall, I'm still happy.
Yeah, I mean,
the guy's a freaking idiot, but
there's not much going on in his head, but that's part of the shtick too.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to hurt his wallet for him to change his mind.
It's good news that he at least says, well, I'm not really interested in the culture war stuff. This is the kind of guy where I guess you could see him saying, like, I found a source for, like, the light bulbs. I'm not angry about that anymore.
But the flip side of that, and I know this is going to piss off a lot of people on our side.
No? Listen up, people.
Waste so much time fighting the culture wars.
Yeah. Well,
I know they're on the wrong side of it, but that's not the war to fight. That's the last war. This one's going to have to be, and I'm sorry, Carville's right. It's the economy, stupid.
Well, it's always the economy.
It's always the economy.
The culture war part of it, I mean, to the extent that it ever needs to be fought, they're going to be.
Let Hollywood fight. That's not your ballot.
It's not mine, personally, but I think that's largely because that flank is well covered by people for whom the culture war is an existential issue.
I'm not saying, okay, well, just abandon
you don't do that.
In need and let them do everything. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying don't let that be the focus. The focus is the economy. And by the way, don't do what you're doing for hurting those other people.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't. I don't.
And how are we going to prevent those other people from being hurt? Win the election.
Well, that's the chief. That's the best thing we can do for them.
Otherwise,
for the issues.
Otherwise, you're just talking to yourself.
Okay. I mean, to me, I think that's the chief aim of anything, however you want to put it, allyship, I guess, is to say I need to create a political atmosphere where there aren't people constantly trying to eliminate you. And the way to do that, in some cases, some people want to be talked to about eggs. Other people want to be if they want to be talking about the culture war issues and they're persuadable, by all means, and there's plenty of room to do that. It's fine. Hey, Dave Portnoy not going to wake up to that, and that's fine.
No, but what is interesting is Portnoy looked at what Pam Bondi did and said basically she's an idiot.
Yeah.
This is his quote. Obviously, the Epstein list is a circus. I don't know what they're doing walking out with those binders. That's stupid. Referring to the botched stunt, and it was a botched stunt, in which AG Pam Bondi hyped up the release of bombshell Epstein documents only to release information that had been publicly available for years. White House has distanced themselves, said Bondi never told them she was going to do this. That's garbage. Trump's a micromanager.
No. I'm mildly curious about what prompted it. Maybe she thought hometown thing, like we prosecuted him in Florida, so I'm from Florida.
You didn't prosecute him in Florida.
Well, I mean, she didn't.
Just everything about
he did get
what she did was stupid.
Tossed in jail at one point earlier on in his career in Florida. But the guy from the previous Trump administration let him out. Well, what was his name? I already lost track of that guy's name.
That guy.
He was in the cabinet, the whole bit. All right, well, never mind. I can't bring his name to mind. All right, well, so much for Dave Portnoy.
You listening at home, you get extra bonus points if you remember anybody in Trump's first cabinet.
I know, right? The first ones. I remember those guys who got fired and left.
Yeah. But so this is from Brookings, E.J. Dionne and Max Keeney. Trump's first 5 weeks in the polls. Nearly all surveys show Trump support no higher than 50%. And the surveys overall show a net decline in his approval ratings. In fact, yesterday, for the first time, his disapproves were higher than his approves on 538.
That's because he spoke.
The streams have indeed crossed.
Okay,
Trump's
good.
tilt toward Russia is well out of step with the opinions of rank-and-file Republicans, and even more so with Americans as a whole. And Trump's largest challenge involves souring attitudes toward the economy and what he is, or more to the point, is not doing about it. That's why I say to you, egg prices matter, and make sure that everybody knows Trump is responsible. He knows it. That's why he took to the pseudo State of the Union to the joint address to Congress to blame Biden for it. He knows he's vulnerable, and that's why he did that.
Alexander Acosta is who I was thinking of, Trump's first Secretary of Labor, who gave the sweetheart deal to Epstein when he was arrested.
It's funny. You mentioned the name, and I'm still thinking to myself, who the hell is that?
Wow, who's Dave Portnoy? I spent the whole thing saying, I don't know that guy.
Yeah.
So we learn something new every day, I guess. 538 says the streams have crossed. I also see in the news, ABC News says we're closing 538. So they're closing or trying to dump as a unit 538, which, you can feel various ways about. But the moment they realize, all right, we need to say publicly Trump is less popular than he is unpopular, or more unpopular now than popular, which was always the case previously. I don't know why anybody's surprised by this. Well, once it gets announced, ABC News needs to let him go.
Honeymoon, which was way briefer than the usual honeymoon. He didn't get 100 days. He had 30.
Wow.
So this from the Brookings piece, reflecting a tendency across the surveys that found Trump's opponents more passionate than his supporters. Only 30% of the Economist YouGov poll respondents approved of Trump strongly, while 37% disapproved of him strongly. So
very strongly.
He's losing.
Good. Fine. That's nice. Whatever generation you want to call it, people are losing interest in him. That's fine by me.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's that. And I think the most important story, of course, is I feel totally obligated to give you this correction. Gerald Ford was eaten by wolves, not by bears.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I was listening to the show afterwards.
Did we say?
Re-listening to it. I said bears.
Right.
And no, I should have said wolves. I meant to say wolves.
Eaten by wolves.
Yeah.
Great imitation.
Who's eaten by tariffs.
Yes. All right. Well, nothing else happened as far as I'm aware.
As far as the news goes, no. Otherwise, it's basically the news.
Okay. And that'll wrap it up. I'm glad to have learned the name of the guy behind Barstool Sports. I see that the image he's cultivating helps explain why I don't know who he is.
Yeah, exactly. Not your friend.
Not only I'm fine with his issues and his interests in life. You look at him, he's very, like you said, he's just a regular guy kind of vibe going on, and you don't pay attention.
Well, speaking of regular guys, I'm going to end with Clifton Brown's observations on Twitter, which are depressing, but they're depressing because they're probably true.
It's funny because it's depressing because it's true. Got it.
Yeah. 2026 voters upset by the Trump recession vote blue in the midterms.
Could happen.
2028 angry at the economic collapse, voters give Democrats the White House and Congress and swear they'll never vote GOP again. 2030 voters put Republicans back in charge in Congress.
That's probably likely.
Wash, rinse, repeat. This, if you're wondering, is why Republicans never course correct. They don't have to. They pull the same crap every time. Voters punish them for a midterm, maybe an election for the presidency. Then, like an amnesiac, they hand the keys right back to them 2 years later.
Yes.
I remember in 2028, the Democrats won sweeping victories. The Bush economy was a mess. Voters swore they'd never vote Republican again. 2 years later, they did. When you get right down to it, the median voter is Susan Collins. That's what's so depressing. They might not be
Dave
happy.
Portnoy?
They might not even be concerned. Or they may be. But in the end, they're going to vote Republican anyway, and the only people who are fooled by their pretense are congenital idiots.
All right. That does sound familiar. I feel like that was one of the underlying assumptions of discussions with the Obama administration early on. Like, you guys got to nail this stuff down. I know you've just won. It's fantastic. But in a couple years, they're going to try another Republican for president, and it's going to get worse. I had no idea it was going to be Trump, but yeah, if you don't nail down this is unacceptable, the guys you just replaced are going to come back. You have to look backward in order to know what's going to happen going forward.
You have to.
Yeah.
Because people do not have long memories.
Right. And that was one of the major criticisms, I guess, persistent criticism of the Obama style, that people were always saying that he would speak about what was going on and say, Congress is doing this. No, say who it is in Congress, because you have allies in Congress. You're trying to pass legislation that makes sense and will implement your agenda. Say it's Republicans. And he was like allergic to blaming them. And he's gotten better out of office. I mean, I guess it's easier out of office, and he was walking a tightrope, to be sure. But that's one of the downsides of walking that tightrope.
Well, Obama's in a special situation.
Yeah.
Because he could not be the angry black man. In fact, people made sketches about that.
Yep.
What Obama really thinks, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, the backlash for him not being angry was bad enough.
Yes.
Would have been a far worse backlash had he been the angry, voice.
Right. He's not a bad guy, not an idiot for doing it.
If he only does that, he'll mobile. No, he won't.
Yeah, I have a lot more latitude for what you really should be doing than A, the president of the United States, who's supposed to be responsible, and B, the first black president of the United States, who carries a tremendous burden, along with being president of the United States, which is itself a tremendous burden.
Right.
I wish that it could have gone differently.
And so, the message here is simply, people are starting to have doubts about Trump, especially on the economy. It's a vulnerability. It's his kryptonite. Build on it. You don't have to go for the kill immediately. That probably won't work. That in itself will spark a backlash. But understand what the vulnerability is and build on it. However you do, whichever audience you do it with, but make that the focus. It is the economy stupid. It absolutely is egg prices.
Okay. And I think it's well worth the time to think about the Dave Portnoy thing, whatever it might be. The more I think about it, the more I think, like other guys who are self-made, or whether self-made or not, I don't know, who are now millionaires, and trying, actively engaged in politics, are doing things like, I want to live forever, and I think we should extract chemicals from the blood of teenagers. That's weird. Remember, we used to label that as weird for a while. That worked.
It's still weird.
Yeah. And this guy, I guess is sort of the anti-weird. I just like sports and getting money.
Yeah.
Okay, I can understand that.
And the occasional drink.
I do feel like you could broaden your horizons a little bit, but I understand where you're coming from. I like some of that too. Yeah. You with the blood and the everlasting life agenda. No, we don't share anything. And I want to go to Mars. I name my kids X12. No, nothing in common with you.
Yeah, but I want the stock market to always go up, and I do not want the stock market to go down, and I don't understand it going down. It never goes down. And I feel
like a lot of people
1930s was a century ago.
Yeah, right. We didn't know about it. I heard that once it crashed, and one time it even crashed when I was alive.
FDR? What does that mean?
But I didn't notice because I was a kid. So I don't know. All right. Well, I get the idea, and why he's important and of interest, even though I did not know who that was.
I wouldn't say important. I would say notable.
Okay. An important segment of the population that he represents.
He represents a.
They don't want to have anything to do with us, but they think that politics is of no importance to them. But that's because other people have agreed to do the work.
Crash and the stock market goes down, all of a sudden politics becomes interesting to them.
Well, right. And I guess they're now.
Like most people.
They might come to realize at some point, the reason that I was able to ignore this stuff all the time is we've never, up to now, presidents have been relatively responsible people who don't want to crash markets.
Yeah, presidents have been relatively benign. You can make fun of them. Who cares?
Yeah.
But if it turns out they're malignant and they actually hurt you, wait.
Yeah. Right. And he may have, I'm sure he felt like, well, he's a rich guy coming in and he likes to be rich. I like to be rich. We'll have that in common. He'll want to make everybody rich. But it turns out he's a kleptomaniac.
Well, but that's the thing. If that's your mindset,
yeah,
telling people that he's corrupt is neutral.
Yeah, that's true. Well, he's trying to become rich.
It's not the same mindset that we have, which is being corrupt is bad.
Yeah, that's true.
Their mindset, well, that's neutral. The question is, what's he doing for the stock market and my portfolio?
Yeah, and if it's not working because it's more than he's corrupt.
If he's stealing money
wants
from
to steal
me,
you. Yes,
that's bad.
Yes. Now, I think we can make them realize that.
But if he's just stealing money, so long as my stock market stuff goes up, who cares?
Yeah, I guess so. And I guess it's not going to bother him. I mean, is Barstool Sports like a publicly traded company now, or
I don't know, but it's big enough to be.
I guess it is, and I guess it's people who start things on the internet, and it's like if you start something in your basement, and pretty soon people are talking about its market cap.
It's not a publicly traded company.
Okay. Even so, the fact that he's turned it, I like to talk about sports and stuff. Well, everybody does, but I've turned it into millions of dollars for myself. Yeah, that guy isn't going to be terribly moved by corruption or chiseling here and there, but if
Portnoy owns 100% of Barstool Sports.
Okay, well,
private company.
Yeah, all right. I didn't know that. I didn't know whether that was part of that. That's a good idea, and that's an interesting thing, that because the rest of his generation, I think, sort of aimed at the whole aim of everything was to turn whatever your stupid thing was into a publicly traded company, so you could have an IPO and retire.
Yeah, something like that.
But I guess why would you retire from a company where I hang out and drink and talk about sports and don't care about politics? I could see where that would be a dream job for you, sir.
So Aaron Astor has this observation as we leave.
All right.
It doesn't even matter to most people exactly what drives inflation. What matters is people feel they're being unjustly deprived of their ability to purchase goods and services or to consume. Mm-hmm. We were spoiled by decades of very low inflation. When prices skyrocketed in 2021, Americans under 50 had no reference point. People are still angry about it and still face hardships. Anything that threatens even more inflation, bad news. That's Trump's trip tonight. Focus on that.
Okay. We can do that. Yeah, there were times when the economy was not great. Now, interestingly, the economy stupid came from that era. The last time the economy sucked, and now everybody just sort of thinks it's the economy stupid. People, like you said, under 50 think it means something different than people over 50 do. It can be bad. Stupid. So, all right, let's pick this up tomorrow, and maybe all of my buttons will work. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Mighty OCD, listening along with the rest of us, commenting in the middle of that segment about the stock market, the stonk market being in the toilet, pointing out that, of course, as Atrios often and others like him say, people in the know, people who make their living from the stock market, know how to make money both up and down, in up markets and down markets, and that's true, and congratulations to them, I suppose. And I guess to the people in the know who know how to do that stuff, yeah, that'll be a different approach from people for whom the stock market is, I don't know. I learned a while ago that you take what disposable income you have and you turn it into stocks, and then you make money and you don't do anything. And you just sit there and money comes in, and, so I don't know how well acquainted Portnoy is with how to make money in a downturn. But yes, people who are into their finance and have money to spare, it costs a lot. It seems like it costs more money to extract profit from a down market, right? I mean, you have to bet larger amounts of money and to know how to do it. Or have someone do it for you, I guess. And retail consumers of financial products don't typically know how to do that. But I guess what you can take away from that is that's why the money masters of the world don't particularly care to, ensure that the market remains up all the time necessarily, or they're not worried about the retail investors takeaways and the impact of a down market on them. I know how to make money. If you don't, that's your problem. Anyway, you can't count on the financial masters of the universe to help you out with the downturn. They're going to be helping themselves out. And I think a lot of the plays that are available to extract profit from a down market require taking that money from you, the retail investor. So they're certainly not going to fill you in on how to survive the way they do in a situation like that. All right. Well, it seems like the buttons are working better as the day wears on. And maybe I just need to start the computers up earlier and let them warm up. I don't know why that would happen. And I hope I don't forget that I encounter this problem and that there is a workaround. And like I said, maybe it's time just to replace some of the MacBook Pro here and get something up to date. And to that end, I guess I can thank all of the donors whose ongoing support will make it possible to contemplate actually buying some new equipment. It's been a couple of years. And update on the those donors who may have been holding out for the availability of just regular check writing ability rather than having to sign up with some sort of online system to do it. First of all, I will say the online system has the fantastic advantage of once you've signed up, it takes away the pain in the neck aspect of recurring donations. It will handle it for you. And that's what we appreciate the most. Of course, regularity in the support. But for those of you interested in sending, well, I would say paper checks, except we're not actually going to do it that way. But sending checks through the mail? No, through the email. John Stafford has chimed in with the solution for that one. I don't believe that it didn't occur to me, but I'm still getting used to the idea that you can actually, I'm old in this respect, but I'm still getting used to the idea of depositing checks via online banking apps and just taking pictures of them on your cell phone and depositing them that way. I always felt a little weird and shaky to me, but it's a great convenience, especially now as most of the bank branches have closed and the ATMs are disappearing. But John had mentioned to me, well, I had mentioned on the air, I had somebody say that they would like to make a contribution, but they wanted to do it old school, so to speak, by check, and couldn't we do that? And operational security being what it is, even though I'm sure that if you're diligent enough, you can probably come up with the mailing address, and you want to be sure it's the right one. But we can eliminate the mail from it entirely, which is not great for the U.S. Post Office necessarily, but good for me operationally. No mailbox, no mailing address required. John points out now that you can move these checks by photos. You can, in fact, write your check, send the photos to me by email. The email, of course, has already been divulged, kagrox@gmail.com. I can pick it up from there and move the picture from my email inbox and your email outbox to the bank relatively seamlessly using a commonly available telephonic device. And we were able to successfully move John's new contribution in support of the show right into the bank account, which collects the money for that purpose. And so that is available. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt. I have to do a thing. But as far as the physical exertion of the thing, pretty low. But much better if the money gets collected electronically and collated and rolled up into one giant, not really all that giant, but it's pretty good, deposit monthly, as opposed to my processing individual checks over the course of the month. Anyway, so if you just, have no interest in or no ability to or a fear of signing up for an online service to handle the payments, we can handle them in another way. It has succeeded. It has worked. and it's good thinking. Thanks to John, and thanks to all of you, of course, who have found your way to continuing support for the show. We want to always keep drumming that up, and it's extraordinarily important, more important than ever now that we're living under an authoritarian regime that's finding more and more ways to threaten people's livelihoods and their legal status, their livelihood, and it can't be dependent on any corporate entity that can be pressured by the president into firing us. We kind of have to support ourselves directly in this day and age. All right. So now back to the news. Now that all the buttons are working, I mentioned to you that there was this issue of the federal properties having been listed for sale. The Washington Post reported on it. Trump administration makes hundreds of federal properties available for sale. I don't know how up to speed. It's been updated as of 8:46 this morning, so probably we'll have notes about those things being withdrawn from the list of properties, but just to give you some sense of what had been listed. The targeted properties, our subheader says, including several prominent buildings across the country, are part of the administration's effort to dramatically reduce the size of the federal government, but not in a way that makes any particular sense. As it happens, Aaron Weiner, Joe Heim, and Rachel Weiner, spelled differently. There's Aaron Weiner, W-I-E-N-E-R, and Rachel Weiner, W-E-I-N-E-R, and I don't know whether they're both pronounced the same or not. The Trump administration on Tuesday, that's yesterday, announced that hundreds of federally owned properties are available for sale. I bought Fort Knox on eBay just last night, and it was a steal, but that's probably because Trump and Musk have already stolen all the gold out of it, including the headquarters of the Justice Department, Labor Department, and U.S. Census Bureau, an effort that, if carried out, could radically shrink the federal real estate portfolio and have a major impact on the D.C. area. But I'm not even sure how that would even be pulled off. They are, of course, ordering everybody back to work, but at the same time claiming to be selling the office buildings at which people will work. And I should point out, I don't know if it's addressed in this article, but it's super oligarchical in its approach, like right out of the Russian model, just simply taking government property and privatizing it. Like, now, if you're going to continue to operate a Department of Justice, even much diminished Department of Justice, in all likelihood, you're going to want to do it in that building. And it's almost like they don't really discuss, maybe the article does, but the administration doesn't really discuss what they intend to do by selling these buildings. And my guess is that it's very Russian oligarchical. Like, we'll sell you the building, and then that would give you, the purchaser, the right to lease it back to the government for use as a Department of Justice headquarters. And instead of just simply having the government own the building and then use the property that it owns to operate, they'll have to pay rent to some private individual who will claim to own the building in which the Department of Justice works, which, also creates other problems like, can the Department of Justice, if necessary, enforce the law against their own landlord? Or will the landlord say, well, you can enforce it all you want, but I'm evicting you? Or I don't know what. Does the landlord get to roam around the building at night and say, oh, it's just to bring the cleaning crew here, but I'm just going to take a look in some of these file cabinets for a little while if you don't mind, just as a matter of maintaining the property, you understand. I don't know, but that's how things went post-Soviet collapse. The Russian government just sold off state ownership of everything to anybody who could raise the money. And who could raise money in a formerly communist, and it was communist country last week? How did you get the $1 billion you needed to buy the state steel manufacturing concern? And there was only one of them because it was a communist country. And the answer, this is why the oligarchy slid so quickly into mobster rule, and why it was taken over by organized crime. They were the only guys who could raise the kind of money it took to buy even at fire sale prices, state capacity this way. So I'm a little concerned about what they think they're doing, even though they've withdrawn most of these properties from the list. So again, as we were saying, or as they were saying in the Washington Post, Trump administration announced that hundreds of federally owned properties were for sale, including the headquarters of various departments of the government, an effort that, if carried out, could radically shrink the federal real estate portfolio and have a major impact on the D.C. area, maybe, if it's even practicable. The General Services Administration, that's the GSA, that's who we figured was making this listing. They would ordinarily be in charge of such things. That's the government's real estate arm. And you'll recall from the past, 5 to 10 years, how you and I and Armando in particular think of the General Services Administration. This was the office that was charged with leasing what they call the old post office pavilion, the old post office building in Washington, D.C. Postal Service used to be a straight up government entity and had a big office building that went with it as a result. And then when they quasi-privatized the Postal Service, they moved them out of the big office building, and all sorts of other things went on as well. But that left the building in want of occupancy and use. They made some use of it for a while. It was a shopping mall and an eatery. But then they ended up hitting on the brilliant idea of leasing it to somebody for development as a hotel. And as it turns out, Donald Trump, at the time a private citizen and interested in developing hotels and hotel-like properties, expressed an interest in it. But then by the time the work was completed and the place was ready to open, he was a political figure and then eventually an elected official, president of the United States, as a matter of fact. And the lease terms of the building were such that, because it was a government-owned property, they didn't want to lease the property to government employees. It had the potential for creating a gigantic conflict of interest. So the lease specifically said no government employees can lease this building. And they were faced with the problem of having already leased it to the guy who was going to be the federal employee. And the GSA had to come up with a way to handle this. And the way they decided to do it was to say, the president of the United States isn't a government employee, so it's A-OK. Let's go for it. And then, of course, it turned into the emoluments clauses violation factory, and GSA had to overlook that as well. So GSA doesn't have a great track record as our real estate arm in terms of enforcement of rules, regulations, requirements of the lease terms, laws, Constitution, etc. Just a reminder. So the GSA, the government's quote-unquote real estate arm, released a list of 443 office properties deemed, quote, not core to government operations, unquote, as part of its effort to dramatically reduce the size of the federal government. And I guess there the idea was, to begin with, well, why don't we sell off things that the government can do without? And then they asked the dodgy boys, can you give us a list of federal properties that the government can do without? And the dodgy boys heard the assignment. Give us a list of federal properties. And they didn't hear the caveat that the government can do without. Or they heard it, but they said, I don't know what that means. The government can do without everything, because I believe in stupid stuff like network states and that we can exist as a virtual nation based in a computer server somewhere and we don't need physical property. Or I've never taken accounting. Or I don't know what work is, so I'm not really sure exactly what we think of it. Like going to work in an office is not a concept I understand. All my work is virtual, even if I understand what work is. Big Balls at 19 won't understand what work is because he had a job and got fired from it because he couldn't do it right without giving away information, which is, after all, the business you're in, information. You don't want to give that away. That's not how work works. Anyway, these guys know nothing about it, so they provided a list to the GSA. The GSA said, well, gosh, I asked for ones that were not core. What was I supposed to do? Read the list and see if it actually matched what I asked for? No. I'm going to publish the list. And if it was crappy and people turn to the GSA and say, what are you, a bunch of idiots? They'll say, it's those guys that did it, the dodgy boys. And I guess that's how it went. So they asked for a list, or at least they released a list of 443 office properties deemed not core to government operations. The announcement, made hours before President Donald Trump was scheduled to address a joint session of Congress, and he did do that, says the spaces are, quote, vacant or underutilized. By Wednesday morning, however, it was unclear what the administration has planned, because by Tuesday afternoon, actually Tuesday evening, it was pretty clear that the administration had not planned anything at all, because Tuesday evening, 123 rows on the list disappeared. Remember, there were 443 originally. 123 of them disappeared, leaving out all of the D.C. properties and most of those in Virginia and Maryland, which looks dumb because it's disorganized and those things. It's very stupid to have ever had them on the list at all. But in the end, at least, I guess you could say, well, it's smart-ish. I guess smart might not be the right word, but it's correct of them to remove them from the list. They are, in fact, core to government operations, and you weren't listening to the assignment. On Wednesday, the entire list had been taken down, and the GSA webpage said that the non-core property list was, quote, coming soon. How soon? Yesterday. But the list sucked, so we took it down. I mean, it is once again obvious and on display. The dodgy boys have no understanding of what they're handling, no clue about how to do these things, and are only half listening to the instructions. And I guess you'd have to say that's the work culture. Elon Musk tells them, just move fast and break things. And if the thing you break is important and valuable, unbreak it. Which to them means unplug it, take the list down. It's too late. We all saw it. We know you're stupid, but you can pretend it's gone. And rewriting history is, you have a president who's perfectly willing to do that, so you just pretend you didn't do it the first time. Some of the properties on the initial list had previously been marked for sale, but others on the list represent the Trump administration's aggressive efforts to fundamentally shift the manner in which the federal government operates, which is, again, a bit of a sweetener, right? We're trying to explain. You see, no, they have a legitimate and logical goal here. They want to reduce the size of government. That's one thing. But to do it by saying, why don't we just sell every building the federal government owns? No, that's not really much of a thing. You can't do it, and it's also a dumb-looking plan. Back to the article here. Others on the list, as we were saying, represent the Trump administration's aggressive efforts to fundamentally shift the manner in which the government operates. And while the plan, and there's a link here, is national in scope, the capital region would be the most affected should it go forward. Nearly 1/3 of the buildings slated for closure are in the district or its Virginia and Maryland suburbs. That's because the government is actually headquartered here for the most part. There's a graphic showing a map of the United States and where the buildings that are targeted for sale are, with an attempt being made to show the magnitude of the amount of properties in the various locations by, I guess, adding a third dimension of height on this map. So the larger and higher the I don't know what you would call it here. There's dots that get turned into cones here to try to demonstrate how much real estate we're really talking about in various areas. You'll get the idea once you see it. In its initial version of its list, the administration targeted 41 locations for disposal in the district, representing about 17 million square feet of federal property. Right. So if it wasn't for the fact that it was already super dumb because these are the department headquarters and you told everybody they have to go back to work in the office and you're selling those offices, in addition to all of that, even if that was just surplus space that really wasn't being used, the idea of dumping 17 million square feet of office space in downtown D.C. all at once, and then thinking, well, this is how much office space costs to buy in the D.C. area, multiply that by the square foot, and then multiply that by the 17 million square feet. That's how much money we'll get. Book that as the savings to the federal government. Ignores all of the economic and transactional realities of actually selling real estate on an open market where there's a finite number of people who need or want space, and they'll be looking to pay as little for it as possible. You need to sort of figure on that and work it out. Get an accountant. Get a real estate professional to help you. Get an economist to tell you something about how that's likely to actually go before you book the savings. But the dodgy boys don't do that. The Justice Department's Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest headquarters, also known as, ironically enough, the Robert F. Kennedy Building. No objection to selling it from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., apparently. The Robert F. Kennedy Building. There's the Social Security Administration's Wilbur J. Cohen Building on Independence Avenue Southwest, and the Agriculture Department's South Building just off the National Mall, all listed as available for sale. So has the U.S. Census Bureau's headquarters in Suitland, Maryland, alongside 82 other buildings and 11.4 million square feet in that state, Maryland. Other federal properties in the district identified as non-core by the GSA include the Labor Department headquarters on Constitution Avenue, the American Red Cross building on 17th Street Northwest, and the National Museum of American Diplomacy located inside the State Department. The rest of the building they get to keep, but not the National Museum of American Diplomacy. The GSA should also have been on the list. Why not sell their headquarters? Which included its own D.C. headquarters on the list, owns 47 million square feet of property in the D.C. region, and it's all for sale, including the office from which they're selling it. The Pentagon and some other major federal properties in the D.C. area did not appear to be affected. I guess the White House, the Pentagon, whatever. But outside the region, the Oklahoma City federal building that replaced the one destroyed in a 1995 domestic terrorist attack was on the list, as was the federal building in Detroit that Congress recently named after Rosa Parks. So, of course, they would be upset about that one. Does everyone remember the building that was... you remember that there was a building destroyed in Oklahoma City? Do you remember the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building? I guess they didn't call the replacement building the Murrah Building. I don't know. A GSA spokesperson described Tuesday's announcement as part of its effort to save money. Non-core assets cost over $430 million annually to operate and maintain, and represent over $8.3 billion in recapitalization needs, and often do not provide federal employees the high-quality work environments they need to fulfill their missions, the spokesperson said in a statement, adding that the list of non-core assets is still subject to change or erasure, depending on how things go. The scale of the effort stunned regional officials and real estate experts, even amid the publicized push by the Trump administration and tech billionaire Elon Musk's U.S. Dodgy Service to shed federal property and reduce some agencies' staff by as much as 90%. The announcement came on the heels of widespread terminations of federal office leases, which have caused confusion after workers were ordered back to the office only to learn that many of their offices are slated for closure. A former senior GSA official questioned whether the administration could succeed in disposing of this many properties, especially after terminating so many of the workers who would be responsible for carrying out the process, right? That's an interesting thing, too. I want you to sell this building. Okay, fine. I have a buyer. They are interested in talking to the seller. Who's representing the seller? That would be Joe Smith. Okay, Joe? No answer, of course, because Joe's been fired and his email's been turned off and you don't have his phone number and you can't get in touch with him to tell him you're rehired. We need you to help come in and sell the building. Well, maybe that was a dumb plan. I don't know. A lot of these are, in fact, core assets and are fully occupied and relatively new. even, said the former official who requested anonymity because he still works in the real estate sector and fears reprisal from the administration. Even if you wanted to sell the building with all the people GSA has gotten rid of, I don't think they have the manpower to sell all these buildings, let alone the money it'd take to move all the feds, who still are working for the government, out of those buildings. That's another problem, too. Where do you put them if you sell the building? And there's always that. Plus, who's going to pack up the boxes? Who's going to arrange for trucks to carry the boxes to the new place? Who's going to unpack those boxes? Who's going to get a new place? Where will the new place be? Where will the money come from to get the new place? Who has to get paid to get the new place? All of these things. By the way, also in all of this, I know this is the least of our concerns, but the federal government, when they own a building, they don't pay taxes to the locality for that building, although they do make what they call payments in lieu of taxes, PILT. And of course, if you eliminate all those buildings or the government ownership of them, every place that hosts a federal building loses out on those PILT payments. But who cares about that? Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on with the property listing debacle before moving on to any number of other important topics, and just try to keep somewhat up to speed on all the things that are collapsing around us. Let's see, we left off discussing... Oh, right. Something that actually wasn't mentioned so far in the article, the payments in lieu of taxes. I know that's sort of bottom of the list of things that are wrong with all of this, but good points, good practical, logistical points. I always find it interesting. I always love learning about the logistics of actually making stuff like anything, well, stuff like this, or any sort of large moves actually work. And it's just something that's I think it's entirely beyond the dodgy boys. Some of them might actually, be interested in it. I don't know. But none of them have any experience in it. I'm interested in it, but I have no experience in it per se. I just find it interesting always to learn what it takes to make these things work. And this guy makes a good point. Even if you sold the buildings, I don't know, or if you wanted to sell the buildings, I don't know if you have enough employees left who handle these real estate transactions to do the work. And what about all the money it'll take to move federal employees to new headquarters, wherever they may be? Not to mention, how much will it cost us to rent those headquarters? Is this a good idea at all? And is the money we'll be paying in rent going to cost more than the ownership costs of the buildings cost us before? I don't know. You would hope that someone did that math first, but I don't know that that's where the dodgy boys come from. I don't know if they, I don't know how good they are at math. I mean, you have to be reasonably good at math, I think, to be a computer science major. But Did they do this? And is accounting math in their wheelhouse? I don't know. The former official noted that many of the buildings are subject to historic preservation protections, and we can just assume that the Trump administration will happily ignore that stuff, then get sued, and then end up having the whole debacle cost them more than it would have cost just to leave things as they were. But anyway, so they are subject to historic preservation protections in some cases, and disposing of them requires compliance with environmental impact rules. They also want to ignore that, all of which take time, which is something Dodgy hates taking. He called certain properties on the list nonsensical, including a federal courthouse in Los Angeles that was built less than a decade ago. If you get rid of that asset, where are you going to hold federal court? He asked. Are you going to go out and lease buildings? I don't know what the strategy is. And the thing is, they don't have one. So what's the point? Representative Jerry Connolly, you all know his name, been in the news recently, whose suburban district in Virginia includes many government workers, said in reaction to the initial version of the list that it makes sense to look at the federal footprint and whether some buildings are no longer necessary. How reasonable he is. Sir, honestly, I'm overwhelmed by your reasonableness. But the problem we have here is the Dodgy approach is completely thoughtless and mindless, he said, where the utility is of either a unit in a federal agency or property is underestimated or ignored at great expense to the American people. I'm not even certain what that statement means, but can't you just say it's effing dumb? They don't think about what to do with these agencies. If you're not closing the agency, it has to do some work somewhere. If you get rid of its office building, it's got to pay for office space elsewhere, and you got to pay for the move. Does this make sense? No, it doesn't. They don't know about accounting. They don't know about logistics. They're just in over their heads. The changes would also be destabilizing for the D.C. Metro, which was built in large part to ferry people who work in and with the federal government. A third of the stations in the metro system, right? Everybody knows the subway, as it's called in other places, but I think more places use metro than subway. But, the mass transit system. How was it planned? Well, one of the problems is that a third of the stations have federal property on top of them. And so transferring ownership of it will cause unknown problems, for one thing, as the private property owners. I assume that the deed comes with some sort of an easement for the existence of the metro station underneath, but I don't know. I assume you can write that into the contract. That's not necessarily the issue. But another thing is, of course, the mass transit system was planned for the purposes of, efficiently moving federal workers and people who have to, for whatever reason, visit these federal installations and moving them directly to it. So now, of course, even if you find a great price and save some amount of money somehow by relocating, let's say, the Department of Agriculture to private office space elsewhere in D.C., is there a metro station there or nearby? And do the thousands of people who used to be able to commute directly from, commuter parking lots in their neighborhood directly to right underneath the building they work at, and now have to spend, it's a 10-minute bus ride. Everybody's got to transfer to bus lines. Do we have adequate bus transportation to it? Uber, taxi, what have you, walking, anything? What does this cost for the commuters who have to get there, the visitors who have to get there? You couldn't ask for more convenience in being dropped off at Federal Center Southwest or something like that, directly within steps of your federal agency. Now it's elsewhere. It's in the suburbs. It's not served by Metro. Who knows? Metro's large. And so now, just speaking in terms of impact on the Metro's operating system and the operating budget for the train system, what does that mean? Metro's largest customer every day is the federal government. And it's a mutually beneficial relationship, Connolly said. Good point. If you jeopardize those patterns of work and commute, you could upend the entire metro system that we started over 50 years ago. That's an excellent point. And I'm sure never occurred to anybody in Dodgy. They don't know. How do you even get to work? We don't even go to work. And I guess if we have to go, we go by Uber. What about the millions of people who are moved every day by Metro? I don't know. Who cares about them? They're low productivity workers. They're not big brain geniuses like us. So we don't care. Some district officials have expressed eagerness for the federal government to turn over underutilized buildings, which could be transformed into more varied uses, and bring in property taxes. I mean, you can't make a hotel out of everything, but maybe some things. In the southwest quadrant of the city, they see a particular opportunity to build a neighborhood connecting the National Mall and the Wharf District, where hulking federal offices now stand. Nina Albert, D.C.'s deputy mayor for planning and economic development, said in a statement that the scale of this disposition is likely to cause challenges, but that the city hopes to work with our federal partners on a responsible strategy. Oh, well, too bad about that. That maximizes the benefit of these sites and adds to the economic vibrancy of the nation's capital. The federal effort to dispose of property, quote, could be good news for the city if the properties that are currently tax exempt become privately owned and get added back to the tax rolls, said Steve Teitelbaum, adjunct professor of real estate at American University, referring to the fact that the federal government doesn't pay property taxes to the district. No discussion of payments in lieu of taxes, really? But he noted that the plan will work only if the government can find buyers for the building in a challenging environment for commercial real estate. The problem is, if you dump it all on the market at the same time, when the market is already depressed, what are you going to get for it? He said. And that, too, should have been sort of basic and intrinsic to the whole operation, but apparently totally ignored by the spreadsheet boys. And they're not even spreadsheet boys. If they were spreadsheet boys, working with that kind of data and actually keeping an eye on the bottom line, I'd have reason to be less concerned, but they might actually just be terrible at it. So don't drop your concern entirely, but that's not what they do. Look, my job is I can take this data and put it in that format. That's all I do. What happens with it, what the numbers mean, that's somebody else's department. In the meantime, though, I charge you with disposing of all federal property, even though money numbers, not your game. You're not going to do well with that. All right, let's see. Other things that deserve discussion, well, there's too many of them. But things that will give discussion time to, well, that we've got plenty of. Let me open up this one and just give you the source here of something I mentioned early on at the beginning of the show. This time, Anna Bauer, whose name we called the other day, she, via Blue Sky, watching all of the court proceedings all over the place. Some of the top court cases in lawsuits filed against most of this dodgy action, whether it is firing of federal workers or anything else. She notes that Trump's statements about dodgy during the non-State of the Union address are already showing up in case filings. This was something she posted last night at 11:47 p.m. So, before the clock ticked over at midnight, we were already finding out that people on social media had copies of the filings in court that had been made earlier that evening. She begins with this illustrative example. See this notice. Tonight, in American Public Health Association versus OMB and Lentini versus Dodgy as well. Two separate cases, I guess, working over similar grounds. Maybe the cases have been joined. Not sure. But American Public Health Association versus OMB. Notice of new evidence is being filed here in support of their motion for expedited discovery. Docket number 20, plaintiffs Gerald Lentini, Joshua Ehrlich, and National Security Counselors Incorporated hereby submit new evidence which conclusively demonstrates the expedited discovery is urgently needed to ascertain the nature of the Department of Government deficiency and its relationship to the United States dodgy service, of which Amy Gleason is, I would add, said to be the acting administrator. At approximately 9:46 p.m., President Trump, perhaps you've heard of him, stated the following in his joint address to Congress. They keep calling it a joint address to Congress. Is that a formal designation? I would have thought maybe an address to a joint session of Congress. What's a joint address? I'm not sure, but maybe that's the term of art. What did he say at 9:46 p.m.? To further combat inflation, this is Trump, to further combat inflation, we will not only be reducing the cost of energy, we're just going to declare the cost of energy low, but we'll be ending the flagrant waste of taxpayer dollars. And to that end, I have created the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. He calls it Doge, but you say Dodgy. Perhaps you've heard of it. He actually says that, perhaps. Which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight. So round of applause there for Elon Musk. He stood up, takes little bows because he's such a modest fellow. And by the way, how do you footnote it when you just saw it on TV? And the answer is it just says here, live, Donald Trump delivers speech to Congress, Associated Press, March 4th, 2025, and then linking to a YouTube video capture of it. And how do you like that? That's some fast-moving stuff. So at 9:46, or approximately 9:46, Trump says that. By 10 o'clock, 10:15, it's on YouTube, and by, I don't know, there's no time stamp on this submission, is there? But at any rate, by 11:47, it's not only been submitted to court, but electronically docketed and made available to reporters who posted it before midnight. So almost 10 o'clock, he says it, and before 12, it's circulating on social media. So, they're going to have to reopen discovery in a couple of cases and settle this about whether or not it was just, he's just joking, maybe? Do you think that they can get away with that with the courts? I'm not really sure. It depends, what kind of mood these courts are in here. Let's see. I also put aside something from Chris Geidner over at Law Dork, his Substack, in which he circulated via Blue Sky the other day, noting that U.S. District Judge Rudolph Contreras found that President Donald Trump's effort to fire Kathy Harris as a member of the Merit Systems Protection Board was in fact illegal. Accordingly, he found it appropriate to issue a declaratory judgment that she remains in office and a permanent injunction as to defendants other than Trump against her removal unless Trump follows the MSPB's removal provisions. He could now go through that, I guess, probably time-consuming, difficult, and paperwork-laden process and still fire her, but he hasn't done it yet. So paperwork, always a problem for Donald Trump. Trump and paperwork, man. A district court says, no, she's not fired. Now, Contreras, an Obama appointee, had previously issued a temporary restraining order keeping Harris in office during consideration of her case. As with other removal challenges, expect a quick appeal. And there was an update by 5:15 p.m. yesterday. DOJ had announced its appeal and asked for a stay pending appeal. So just like is happening in so many other cases, they are, I don't know whether they're making an appeal to the Intermediate Appeals Court or appealing on an emergency basis directly to the Supreme Court as they did in other cases. And I guess we're still waiting to find out what is going on at the Supreme Court level. I parked right after the show yesterday. I made mention of what was going on and that Steve Vladeck had something to say about it. And I grabbed a Blue Sky post for him from yesterday, noting that it's been 6 days since Chief Justice Roberts placed an administrative stay on the foreign aid cases. This was USAID programs that had been suspended, blocked, the funds purportedly impounded by the president, and then that there had been a preliminary ruling, a temporary restraining order in place blocking the impoundment, which meant that the programs were supposed to be turned back on again, and then an appeal from the government directly to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court putting a stay on the temporary restraining orders, which would turn the programs temporarily back off again, but only on a temporary basis, while the court organized itself to decide what to do about the claims that turning all of the USAID programs off was illegal. But they've already spent a week pondering how to approach the case. So it's very difficult to read what's going on here. Steve Vladeck saying it's been 6 days since that happened. That almost certainly means, one, that someone's dissenting. So they have disagreement about whether or not to do anything and what to do if they do something. Two, the court is trying to reach a compromise, or both as a third option. Hard to be sure which it is, but the continuing pause is itself producing plenty of harm. We don't know whether these programs are running or not. And people are starving in the meantime. It is rather problematic, don't you think? Anyway, that we hinted that was what Steve Vladeck was thinking about yesterday, and just wanted to share that post with you by way of proof. What else have we got here? Something we can't read all the way through because it's another long piece, but I wanted you to be aware of it. It's actually this extensive report from Public Citizen and a documentation of another area in which the Trump attempt to remake government or destroy government, depending on how you view it, is having a big impact, and we haven't really been discussing it. Corporate clemency is the terminology they use for it, and of course part of the headline of their report here too. Corporate clemency, how Trump is halting enforcement against corporate lawbreakers. So I'll give you a taste of what's going on here rather than a read all the way through of what's going on. We'll give you the key findings section at a minimum. After freeing January 6th rioters, of course, infamously enough, our report author Rick Claypool says, he's not the report author, but the summary of the report, which is it's a report length summary of the report too. So I don't even know how much time we're saving by reading the summary. But Rick Claypool is the byline on this entry here. The key findings: after freeing January 6th rioters, Donald Trump's second administration is rapidly moving toward a new priority, granting get-out-of-jail-free cards to corporations facing investigations and federal lawsuits over corporate misconduct. And that's always the hobby horse of Public Citizen's view, corporate malfeasance, and we're glad that they do it. Trump's administration is moving rapidly to halt and hinder federal investigations and cases against alleged corporate lawbreaking. Some bullet points here, and some sub-bullets as well. Let's see. Top line bullet point: Trump administration has already halted or moved to dismiss enforcement investigations in cases against 89 corporations. 25% of the corporations in Public Citizen's tracker of prominent investigations into and enforcement actions against corporations at the end of the Biden administration, including some sub-bullet points here. All 42 corporations facing Consumer Financial Protection Bureau cases and investigations. 7 dismissals have been sought so far, but if you're going to close the CFPB, everybody who's currently engaged in lawsuits or other enforcement actions by CFPB now feels entitled to a dismissal of their case. 20 corporations facing DOJ and SEC cases and investigations into possible Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violations. 8 corporations facing DOJ Civil Rights Division cases and investigations. 1 dismissal, by the way, a case against Elon Musk's SpaceX has been sought so far. 7 corporations facing DOJ Environment and Natural Resources Division cases and investigations. Remember, that's where Jeff Clark came from originally. 7 cryptocurrency corporations facing SEC cases and investigations, 5 of which the Trump administration has filed to dismiss. And 6 employers facing EEOC cases for discrimination against transgender and non-binary workers, which the Trump administration has filed to dismiss. Now back to the top-level bullets. Additionally, firing of National Labor Relations Board members and EEOC commissioners mean that these regulators lack the quorum needed for finalizing enforcement decisions, including NLRB cases against 100 corporations included in the tracker. There are nearly 27,000 open NLRB cases in total, by the way, and 34 corporate inauguration donors facing federal enforcement collectively gave at least $34 million. Isn't that interesting? 34 inauguration donors, $34 million. Everybody had to ante up $1 million just to get into the pay-to-play game. These 34 corporations collectively face 60 separate federal investigations and lawsuits. The beneficiaries of Trump's corporate clemency are addressed next. We'll read through that. President Trump talks tough on crime, but his administration is once again betraying a preference for going soft on corporations that break the law. Public Citizen is tracking federal investigations and cases into corporate misconduct that the Trump administration inherited from the Biden administration. The following analysis covers 429 separate investigations and cases against 361 corporations over alleged lawbreaking, including at least 25 involving allegations of criminal misconduct. The first time Trump took office, corporate enforcement plunged. Now, just over 1 month into Trump's second term, it's clear that the permissive approach to corporate crime and misconduct is returning with a vengeance. Whole categories of enforcement have come to a screeching halt, including all CFPB cases, 7 of which the Trump administration has already moved to dismiss, as you know, Justice Department cases brought by Civil Rights and Environment and Natural Resources Divisions, all listed above, investigations and cases under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and EEOC Commission cases, as we mentioned earlier, and SEC actions against cryptocurrency corporations. This is only the beginning. The tracker is not comprehensive, but is intended to highlight the most significant corporate investigations and cases gleaned from agency announcements, news reporting, and financial filings. Priority for inclusion, methodology-wise, is given to investigations and cases against larger corporations and categories of enforcement targeted by Trump administration policies. You should note that the existence of investigations and or allegations of misconduct do not necessarily mean that laws were broken or that an enforcement action necessarily would have been brought under a different administration. But the full searchable database of corporate investigations and links to the underlying sources is available through their corporate enforcement tracker. What's happening? Big tech oligarchs seeking corporate clemency from the Trump administration include Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Alphabet, the parent company of Google, Tim Cook, Tim Apple, you know who Tim Cook is, who, by the way, yes, faces DOJ antitrust lawsuits alleging monopoly violations in the smartphone market, in case you were wondering why he's on the list. Xiao Zhi-Chu, the CEO of TikTok. You, of course, remember the whole TikTok situation. Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, facing an FTC investigation. Dara Khosrowshahi is my best guess. That the current CEO of Uber, reportedly opposing an FTC settlement proposed at the end of the Biden administration over alleged consumer protection violations. And, of course, Elon Musk, who's got his own set of bullet points there. Neuralink, under investigation by USDA over its alleged misconduct related to the treatment of test monkeys, and an SEC investigation alleging unspecified misconduct. That's just Neuralink. SpaceX, in the process of negotiating a resolution with the EPA over pollution problems in Texas, an FAA lawsuit alleging multiple safety violations involving rocket launches in Florida, an NLRB complaint alleging that the company illegally fired workers who criticized Musk. The Trump administration dismissed a DOJ civil rights lawsuit against SpaceX alleging discrimination against asylees and refugees in hiring practices. Tesla faces a criminal fraud investigation by DOJ over exaggerated claims about the self-driving capability, an autopilot. That they misled investors is the subject of an SEC investigation. There's an EEOC investigation into racial discrimination and workplace retaliation at the Tesla factories in California. 4 National Highway Traffic Safety Administration investigations into vehicle problems. 7 open NLRB cases about unfair labor practices. OSHA investigations about worker deaths at Tesla factories. All of those still pending. And, of course, he's got other companies. X, formerly known as Twitter, of course, faces an SEC lawsuit against Musk alleging misconduct relating to his $44 billion takeover of the company, and an NLRB case alleging unfair labor practices. In other words, basically, he faces allegations of unfair labor practices at all of his companies. And XAI has an EPA investigation into air pollution concerns relating to its Colossus supercomputer in Memphis, Tennessee. So that's pretty much everything. I don't see the boring company listed in that one, but let's see. So Neuralink, SpaceX, Tesla, X, and XAI all have multiple investigations from multiple departments. No conflict of interest there in having him shut those departments down, of course, right? Sure. With the carrot of dropped or weakened enforcement dangling over corporate America, we are already seeing executives approve actions to pander to the president in apparent hopes of friendly treatment in return. Apple, Google, Microsoft all renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America on their map apps. Jeff Bezos, of course, reorienting the Washington Post editorial page to exclusively publish columns promoting personal liberties and free markets, whatever that means. And Sam Altman partnering with Trump to announce the $500 billion Stargate AI infrastructure plan should be understood with the prospect of potentially dropped enforcement cases as a key part of their political context. The investigation and cases into corporations documented in Public Citizen's Tracker includes a wide range of misconduct, including alleged financial violations by the biggest banks, antitrust violations by big tech titans, unfair labor practices by large employers, pollution crimes by oil and gas corporations, egregious instances of discrimination and safety violations that have injured or killed workers and consumers. You know, that's a lot.
To Kagro in the morning with Waldman.
Well, it's time now for you to listen to Justice Putnam in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy right here on Netroots Radio. Starting off with what? Trump's pathetic behavior throughout the day yesterday is chronicled from crashing the markets to his disastrous joint session speech. Of course, that's going to be on top of the agenda for today. Much more to come, and of course, we'll see you tomorrow.